Roll call for day 25, Tuesday, February 18th. Anderson? Here. Barlow? Present. Broner? Brennan? Here. Case? Present. Cooper? Here. Craigo? Here. Crum? Here. Dockstetter? Here. Driscoll? Here. French? Here. Guru? Here. Hicks? Here. Hutchings? Here. Ide? Here. Jones? Here. Kolb? Present. Landon? Here. Larson? Here. McEwen? Here. Nethercott? Here. Olson? Here. Pappas? Here. Pearson? Here. Rothfuss? Here. Salazar? Here. Schuler? Here. Scott? Here. Smith? Here. Steinmetz? Here. President Beitman?
Here.
Mr. President, 31 present.
31. All right. Thank you, Alan. Good job, gang. Prayer by Pastor Vicky Martinez from Grace United Methodist Church.
Good morning. Let us pray. Gracious God, thank you for your presence here among this assembly. May we be gathered today with hearts overflowing with gratitude for the opportunity to serve these communities. May we acknowledge the blessings bestowed upon us and recognize the responsibilities these blessings bring. Help us to see the beauty in each soul that is encountered and to serve with humility, compassion, and respect. May these collective efforts ignite a spark of hope and inspire positive change. Thanks is given for the privilege to serve. And Lord, as we continue this service journey, may your direction be sought through your divine guidance. May you illuminate a right path and grant discernment to identify the most pressing needs. May the decisions this assembly makes be through the wisdom to devise solutions and therefore carry the courage to take action. May this service be a beacon of hope, lighting the way for others. With this gathering in service, we celebrate the rich tapestry of diversity that encompasses our communities. Help us embrace our differences and find strength in our collective unity. May our service bridge gaps, dissolve barriers, and foster a spirit of inclusivity. Grant us the grace to appreciate the unique gifts and talents each individual brings to this shared mission. Lord, these hands and hearts are offered for your glory, trusting in your infinite wisdom and grace. Thank you for these, your servants, and their ability to make hard decisions as we thank you for the opportunity to serve. We pray this in the name of Christ. Amen.
Senator Scott, will you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading, correction, and approval of journal. Will the reading clerk please read the journal committee report?
Mr. President, your journal committee reports that the journal of February 14, 2025 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Crum, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the report is adopted. Senator Barlow.
Mr. President, privilege of the floor.
Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, members, it's my pleasure today to have you help me welcome the State 4-H Leadership Team. I'll call out their names if they'll stand up. Maeve from Carbon County, Trey from Park County, Maylee from Uinta County, Presley from Park County, Alice from Sublette County, Wyatt from Albany County, Bricks from Sublette County, and their advisors, Kim and Mary Louise. All of them are here. Please welcome them to the Senate. They've traveled from all over the state. They've had 2 good days in the Capitol. This is their final day, so let's give them a good Senate welcome. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. Welcome to the Senate. Senator McEwen.
Mr.
Mr. President, privilege of the floor, please.
Yes, sir. The floor is yours.
I'd like to welcome the Campbell County Women's Republican Party up here. Welcome to the Senate.
All right, you're here. All right, welcome to the Senate. All right, new business. Doctors of the day, plural. We had a little bit of a dry spell, and now they're coming in droves. We have Travis Bomingen, MD, Philip Gard, DO, and Elizabeth McKenzie, DO. So welcome them all to the Senate. Yes, sir. Senator Cooper.
Privilege of the floor, please.
Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. These good doctors are all from Hot Springs Health in Thermopolis. A recent, as in the last few years, organized hospital district. It's growing leaps and bounds. It's in a direction to be one of the better hospitals in the state, I think, in the next few years, if not already. Dr. Carr, I believe it is, in the middle, is a Riverton native. So a special welcome for them. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. All right. Today in Wyoming history, in 1943, Wyoming's premier omelet chef was born in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Ron Kasicki is having no cake today because the candles cost more than the cake. Ron, we love you. Where are you at? These up there guarding the door up top. Everybody, happy birthday to old Ron. Hit it. Happy birthday to you. Right. Yeah, per fire code regulations, we couldn't have candles on Ron's cake today. No. Quote for the day, a cloudy day is no match for a sunny disposition. William Arthur Ward. And a couple dad jokes for you to get this Tuesday started. Did you hear about the animal who knew the weather a year in advance? No? They called him an almanac. That could be a good name for this yak here. I used to be addicted to soap, but I finally got clean. And that does it for the dad jokes. Announcements. Reminder, if you traveled home over the weekend, please remember to go sign the mileage book in the LSO office. All right, reports from standing committees.
Mr. President, the following reports are dated February 14, 2025. Committee number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 39, Property Tax Refund Program Revisions, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Case, French, Ide, McEwen, and Pappas. Senator McEwen, Chairman. Committee number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 38, Ad valorem Taxation Payment and Credit of Penalties, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Case, French, Ide, McEwen, and Pappas. Senator McEwen, Chairman. Committee number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 40, Sales and Use Tax Revisions, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Case, French, Ide, McEwen, and Pappas. Senator McEwen, Chairman. Committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 214, Local Government Payments, Electronic Payments, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Cooper, and Jones. Excused, Senators Nethercott and Rothfuss. Senator Anderson, Chairman. Committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred House Bill 64, engrossed, Chemical Abortions, Ultrasound Requirement, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Crum, Hutchings, and Steinmetz. No, Senator Scott. Senator Barlow, Chairman. Committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred House Bill 42 engrossed to regulation of surgical abortions. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Crum, Hutching, and Steinmetz. No, Senator Scott. Senator Barlow, Chairman. Committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 264, Central Bank Digital Currency Prohibitions. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Cooper, Jones, and Rothfuss. Excused, Senator Nethercott. Senator Anderson, Chairman. Mr. President, the following reports are dated February 18, 2025. Committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred House Bill 116, Driver's Licenses, Unauthorized Alien Restrictions. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Brennan, Kolb, and Pappas. No, Senator Cooper. Senator Pappas, Chairman. Committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred House Bill 132 engrossed, Annual Permits for Specified Commercial Loads. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Brennan, Cooper, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Pappas, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. Bills on second reading. House Bill 86, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 86, Public Property and Buildings Amendments, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee.
House Bill 86, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 166, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 166, State Auditor Payment Transparency, sponsored by Representative Bratton.
There is an amendment. Would the reading clerk please read it in?
House Bill 166, second reading amendment number 1, page 2, line 6, delete.
Thank you. Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment to House Bill 166 and ask for your favorable consideration. My computer is locked up and I can't see the bill, but on page 2, line 6, we did have some questions during the first reading on the word vendor. And what we decided to do to help the good senator who asked the question is take on line 2 and delete from the word for to rendered to help them understand or help people who read the law understand that we're just dealing with the vendor. And I do have a sheet here given to me by the auditor and the bringer of the bill to explain that the word vendor is just used throughout their statutes. And if you have any more questions, I'd be glad to give him a copy. So with that, I'd ask for I vote on the amendment and an I vote for the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hutchings. Any discussion on the amendment? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senator Hutchings' motion to adopt second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 166, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Discussion on the bill. House Bill 166, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 199, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 199, Wyoming Freedom Scholarship Act, sponsored by Representative Andrew.
There are amendments. Would the reading clerk please read in the first amendment?
House Bill 199, second reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, corrected copy. Page 3, line 14, delete.
Thank you. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 199. This is the corrected copy, and ask for the body's favorable consideration. Mr. President, it seems like a long amendment, but it simply does one thing, and that is to restore the pre-K aspect of the ESAs. So currently in statute, the pre-kindergarten education savings accounts are funded. The legislation, House Bill 199, removes funding for that program for pre-K. This goes back in and restores any language that was struck and doesn't change the program in any way, doesn't change the rest of the bill in any way. It simply restores the pre-K program that, I'll remind you, Mr. President, there are already 44 children enrolled. And again, we've only been in it for about 2 months, I think, since it's been active. We've got people that are already engaged in this program based on existing statute. This would restore it simply without any further changes or any other policy considerations. It simply, in my view, puts the best part of the program back in place. The pre-K is something that we've been looking for particularly those in need in the state of Wyoming for a long time. And I'd encourage the body to support this amendment and make sure that we keep the pre-K program and don't eliminate it through House Bill 199. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Discussion on the amendment? Let's go to Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. President, just a little discussion maybe for members of the Education Committee or sponsors of the bill. What was the original intent for removing the pre-K component from the bill? I'd like to hear something on that, as if there was a rationale for that. If somebody could help me out with that, it would be helpful, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Scott?
Mr. President, this bill is perhaps the most important of the education reform bills that's still available to us, and this is an important issue, so I'm going to ask for the yeas and nays, Mr. President. And I will say that if you're interested in improving literacy, one of the standard recommendations is a vigorous pre-K program. So I think it will help the bill to retain that feature in the bill, and would urge an aye vote on this amendment, Mr. President.
Thank you. Yeas and nays have been called. Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. You'll see my name's on this amendment as well. Just recognizing that this gets the bill back to the policies we passed last year with relatively, well, we'll say less controversy than we're dealing with now. Appreciate the good points made by my colleagues from Bates Creek. I'd point out that oftentimes in terms of private school settings, these preschool programs are feeder programs for the school itself. So I think this will really strengthen the overall program, both from a reading comprehension standpoint, also in terms of strengthening the choice options in the state. This is an important part of it. So for those reasons, I ask you to support the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Boner. Further discussion on the amendment? Question being called, the chief clerk will call the roll.
Second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 199. Roll call. Anderson. Aye. Barlow. Aye. Boner. Aye. Brennan. Aye. Case. Aye. Cooper. Aye. Crago. Aye. Crum. Aye. Dockstetter. Aye. Driscoll. Aye. French. Aye. Guru. Aye. Hicks. Aye. Hutchings. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? No. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Smith? No. Steinmetz? No. President Beitman? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed on the amendment. 26 aye, 5 no.
Second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 199 has been adopted. We're on second reading amendment number 2. Will the reading clerk please read in the amendment?
House Bill 199, second reading amendment number 2 to engross copy, delete.
Thank you. Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 199 and ask for your favorable aye votes. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, what this does is it deletes our Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 This restores us back to a universal school choice, which is for all children. This will give us equitability for any student who wants to attend a private school or use these funds for education. That's what the bill does. I'm not going to go into more detail. We debated this a lot the other day, but I would just ask that we would restore this to the $7,000 for every student.
Thank you. Discussion on the amendment. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I'll ask for the yeas and nays on this one too. Some of the same reasoning, and as I understand the amendment, it not only restores the funding, it does away with the any requirement for a means test. And I hope that's correct, because I think that's something that's very important. We haven't ever used those on education funding, and I think it's a bad precedent to start now.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Schuler was next, and then we'll go to Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I would push back against this amendment. Again, all the things that we brought up the other day about the constitutionality, we've hit that hard and hit it again and again and again. And taking this back to universal, where it's $7,000, for everyone, basically what you're doing is you're subsidizing not only the upper middle class, but the wealthy. Many of those folks will take advantage of it. That's fine. But bottom line is the amendment as it was that we passed the other day, it would probably, hopefully, pass constitutional muster. And if we want to try and push this bill through, I think that was the amendments that we needed to have in there. So again, it's a policy choice. You open it wide up. I think we're going to end up in the courts. That's just my idea. So please push back against this.
Thank you. Senator Smith.
Mr. President, I'll push the other way. Really, it's discrimination against families that maybe don't qualify based on a means test. So no, this is good. This gets the money in the hands of all families and creates competition, and I'm all for it. And I asked you to be honored for it. So let's states that have passed this have done very well. Their scores have gone up, and we need to do what's right for our families. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Let's go to Vice President Salazar and then Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. On in support of this amendment, if we're going to educate those who believe in an alternative, let's do it right. Is reducing it from 7 to 3 going to be making more constitutional? Again, as I mentioned on Friday, I'm a homeschooler. I'm not going to take this money. But those who do, let's do it right. Let's allow them to educate their children the way they want. Why skimp on the funding for those individuals? On in support of this amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Jones.
On and against this amendment. I guess I'm just a little bit amazed that we have this little blue book that's filled with our Constitution, and depending on the bill, we choose to follow what it says or we choose to not follow what it says. It's in black and white. We're trying to make this bill palatable. We're trying to help the children ultimately. So let's help the people that need our help and not help the folks that don't need it. I do think the means testing is also important, because what I don't want to see is we're going to let some children just fall through the cracks. Some of them won't learn well at home. They might not learn well in an online type school setting, and we will never know. I think it's important to find out the ones that might need some extra help, and for their parents to also know. Sometimes if you're teaching at home, you don't know if your kid is getting everything that you're teaching them. And the means test is a way for them to know, and also for the state of Wyoming to know. We're giving them this money. That means that we're accountable for those students. We can't let them fall through the cracks. We have to make sure they're still learning in the manner that we're paying for.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion on, oh, we have a bunch now. Okay, let's go back to Senator Dockstetter, and then we'll work our way through the room here.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the topic of means testing, what's the motivation to take that out? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Who's next? Senator Scott, you want to go for your second time? Okay, we'll give it to you, Senator Scott.
And let me answer that next one. The motivation to take the means testing out is, in my case, I think there's a principle at stake here. Education, Mr. President, is a fundamental service. We have not historically distinguished on the basis of ability to pay. It's been something that's been universally available. And I think the bill last year set a very bad precedent, and the amendment is trying to remove that bad precedent. Education, we can see it at the university level, where the charge in the Constitution is to be as nearly free as possible. We have not discriminated in the award of the basic Hathaway Scholarship that is available regardless of means. And actually the genius that enabled that to happen was realizing that merit-based and needs-based became equivalent. If you did it for enough people, everybody got it. Everybody that needed it got it. And I think it's important that we keep this precedent, because you want the parents to have an equal opportunity. You want the kids to have an equal opportunity, and regardless of ability to pay, because that's such a fundamental right, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Scott. All right, to you, Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. President, I just want to speak to the issue of subsidies for the rich. And so today, if we take an all-in cost for K through 12, so for each child in this state, you add in all the school construction, the major maintenance, the busing that we reimburse at 100%, the block grant and the model, it's costing somewhere between $19,000 and $20,000 a year for that student. A student that elects to take this is going to get $7,000. And so I don't think that's a subsidy in any form or fashion. In fact, it reduces the number of ADMs that we actually put out there. So in many ways, you could look at this as a substantial cost savings to our cost for the K through 12 education system. So I reject the idea that we're somehow subsidizing the rich with this, but in fact, the net effect will be a reduction in the cost of K through 12 because of the $19,000 to $20,000 and the $7,000. So just on that issue, Mr. President.
Senator Hicks. So let's go to Senator Rothfuss and then Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on and against the amendment. Mr. President, hitting that last argument first, we are required constitutionally to have free and uniform education, public schools. Article 7, Section 1 indicates that the legislature shall provide for the establishment and maintenance of a complete and uniform system of public instruction embracing free elementary schools of every needed kind and grade. Free elementary schools, public education for all. That's what the Constitution requires of us. It very explicitly then goes on to say in Section 8 that it's not for private schools, nor shall any portion of any public school fund ever be used to support or assist any private school. This is not about education funding. In fact, we know through the previous debate that if we were to use education funds, everyone agrees that that's fully unconstitutional, and this is structured to not use educational funds, to use general funds to try and circumvent that language in the Constitution. So it's not about funds, public funds for uniform education, the constitutional guarantee. This is about providing a voucher that then funds that student at a private school. The only way that can be tied to a constitutional benefit is if there's a means test. If it is for everyone, then it is a simple direct violation of Article 7, Section 8, where we're using public funds for private schools. So, again, without the means test, this is first phase unconstitutional. The means test that we passed the other day allows for it to be argued. Whether that would be successful or not, I don't know, but at least you can argue that it's general support for the poor because you're below 250% of the federal poverty level. Mr. President, leaving the means test in place is essential to the constitutionality of this legislation. Now, I haven't been much of a fan of this legislation. Maybe I should vote for this amendment and make it unconstitutional, but that's not my job. My oath that I've sworn is to uphold the Constitution of the state of Wyoming and the U.S. Constitution. This is one of those circumstances where, regardless of what you want to be the case, you have to look to the plain language of the Constitution and understand that the means test is essential for the constitutionality of this program. It currently exists in statute with a 150% of federal poverty level, therefore arguably constitutional. As we have the legislation right now, it's 250%, reasonably constitutional. Removing the means test and allowing for anyone in the state, no matter how wealthy, to subscribe to the program makes it blatantly unconstitutional. On and against the amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for this amendment. For these reasons, this will be an administrative nightmare for whoever's dispersing these funds. Number two, we're picking winners and losers here, which I don't agree with. Number three, hardworking parents pay their taxes just like everyone else. Those over a certain income level should not be penalized for that. And number four, the amendment the amendment that we're trying to appeal intrudes on family privacy as far as income levels. And I don't agree with that either. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pearson. Over to you, Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to borrow a term I heard yesterday. All the constitutional scholars in here. We pick and choose which part of the Constitution we like. Dig into the education part of the Constitution. We are required to provide 4 years of education. Not 12, not 13, not 15, 4 years. But we never touch on that. So we're just going to use the Constitution as we see fit? And the other thing I heard, the wealthy, come on. They're paying a ton of property taxes. How about the people who pay property taxes that don't have children? Maybe we should just do an exemption there. On and for the bill, and just want to point out what the Constitution actually says as we try to bludgeon each other with it, and we've wandered way away from it for years. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Smith, for your second time.
Mr. President, Espinoza versus the Department of Revenue makes it clear that this is constitutional. That is just not an argument that stands in this room. And secondly, if public education is so great, what are we afraid of? If it's rocking the house, and what are you worried about? Competition is a good thing. It's a good thing, and scores go up when there's plenty of it.
All right, any more? Yes, we got a couple more. Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm one of those that's on the fence on this bill and on the fence of the amendment until the good senator from the Ivory Tower spoke out, and I wanted to do a little bit more digging. The portion in Article 7, Section 8, against giving money to public schools or private schools ever. If you look at the beginning of that section, it says these words, "from the said fund." So that makes us go back to Article 7, Section 6, or excuse me, Article 7, Section 7, where it's talking about state permanent school funds. And if I have this right, and if someone can tell me I don't, I'd appreciate it. We're not taking this money from the state permanent school funds, but we're trying to take it from the general fund. So with that, Mr. President, this portion of the Constitution doesn't fit in with what is being said. So if someone can explain that to me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Schuler, for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of things, just one thing that was mentioned about the state average cost per student. It's actually $15,320. I don't know where we keep coming up with 18,000 or whatever else. So if you take that, that amount, the average equitable amount for school supplies and materials would be about $2,200. So I just want to push back on that because, again, and I'm not saying that every wealthy person would take advantage of this. As I've talked to our good vice president, you know, he's a homeschooler. He says he wouldn't take it. I've talked to some people in my county actually this weekend, and it's particularly the homeschoolers that are already homeschooling, have no interest in this. But let's face it, if you open it up and you make it universal, there will be people out there, probably quite a few people, that don't need the money that will take it. And that's what concerns me. That I'm all for school choice. I've said this a number of times, if it's done right. When you open it up like this, particularly when we don't have any data or really a lot of information on what we passed last year, who knows how many will take advantage of it. It's kind of like getting in the car and going, last year we went from 0 to 20, and now we're going from 0 to 60 with this bill by taking out these amendments. So as I said before, voted up or voted down, but you know, I feel a little bit like the good senator from the ivory tower. If we vote for this amendment, I don't think the bill will make it out of the courts. I would like to see the bill make it out of the courts by keeping the amendments in that we had that really make it a pretty good bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Let's go to Senator Driscoll, then Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of questions. I missed out Friday, and I'm sorry, a little confused. Got my Constitution. I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I will make one correction. We do the 4 years. We follow the Constitution. We do 12, but that is following the Constitution. Even though it says 4, it doesn't say only 4. It says we can do 12. My question goes back to, are we removing testing requirements with this? I'm not sure. I didn't get it tracked in. I want to know if we're removing testing or not. Okay, I'm seeing an answer up there. It's not a verbal, but I understand it. Thank you. That's been answered for me. And the second is, are these schools going to be allowed to use our K-12 facilities? Are they going to participate in sports, and can they use them? Because that enters in on what these costs are, is a lot of the other of this end, wrestle, play ball, use music programs. Are they going to have access to it or not? I guess I'm part of the details of it I don't get. I'd like some answers before I get down the road on that end of it.
Thank you, Senator Driscoll. Senator Barlow?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm just going to take maybe those two questions, and it can be verified by the bringer of the amendment. But testing stays in the bill. That was a standing committee amendment. That is not being affected by this standing committee amendment number 1. And then as far as the use or the ability to participate in public school activities, actually the bill, the current legislation, the bill allows for them to participate at some cost outside from within the ESA. So they would be able to pay whatever the fee is. It's kind of interesting that we don't talk about a reasonable fee. We just say there's a participation ability with monies that come from the ESA. So I'm certainly not a sponsor of this bill or expert on it, but that's how I understand it at this time. But Mr. President, if I could, I want to go back, and there was a mention of the Hathaway Scholarship, and maybe its relevance in this discussion. And while we do not differentiate based on the student's income or the family's income to participate in the Hathaway, we do limit it to the community colleges and the university. It is, those monies are not eligible for anybody to participate at a private tech school, private church college, et cetera. So while we may not have limited on one end, we certainly have on the other. And if we do that with this, I'm pretty interested in giving some of those private institutions access to the Hathaway Scholarship for those Wyoming students. So I just throw that out there that we got to make sure if we're going to follow the standard, let's look at the entire standard. For the Hathaway, we do not allow it for private institutions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. Further discussion? Yes, back to you, Senator Rothfuss, for your second time.
For my second time, Mr. President, I just wanted to go back to a couple of points that were discussed on the constitutionality. And particularly, I wanted to hit on the Espinoza decision. The Espinoza decision is being wildly misinterpreted, and this is fairly common. The Espinoza decision specifically said that if you are giving money to a private institution, you can't then choose not to give it to religious associated institutions. That's what it says. It doesn't say you have to give it to private institutions, and it doesn't say you have to give it to religious institutions. It just says that if you're giving it to private, you can't discriminate against private institutions based on their classification as religious. The Wyoming Constitution is perfectly consistent with the Espinoza decision because it says you can't give the money to private schools at all. It doesn't care whether they're religious or not. It does note that you shouldn't give it to religious institutions, but it used private schools to begin with. So it is clearly consistent. There's no mandate by Espinoza that we are required then to be able to give funds. And if it's unconstitutional according to the Wyoming Constitution, the Espinoza decision does not preempt the Wyoming Constitution based on the language and the reading of it. And finally, Mr. President, getting to the constitutionality with regard to the funds, that some funds or specific funds from education are the only ones that are being targeted, and that other funds would then be available. When you get to the other funds side of things, you simply go to section 16.6 of the Constitution, which indicates that neither the state nor any county, city, township, town, school district, or any other political subdivision shall loan or give its credit or make donations to or in aid of any individual association or corporation except for necessary support of the poor. And then it goes on to provide further restrictions. So even general funds are not allowed to be given out in this capacity. And again, you know, the idea somehow that because we've defiled the Constitution in recent years, we're all fine to do it now and we should blow it off, I don't think is a solid argument. I think each and every time, Mr. President, we're working a bill, we're obligated to vote in compliance with the Wyoming and U.S. Constitutions. And just because this chamber has failed in the past, notably, to do that on several occasions, doesn't mean we should all abandon our obligation to uphold it at this point in time. That's why we swear an oath. So it is up to us to do our best to interpret the Constitution and to uphold the Constitution, even if we're not all constitutional scholars, as we'd like to be, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. Anybody else wish to speak on the amendment? Back to the bringer, Senator Brennan, for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, body, for the great discussion. I appreciate it. I think we always get the best when we discuss things. There was a question on what was the motivation to take the means testing out, which was, the means testing was out in the original bill, has the 7,000. There was a vote to put the means testing back in on committee of the whole, but I want to remind the body that a couple years ago, we passed a bill out of here and sent it down to the other body that was universal, signaling to everybody that we do care about all of our students and that they all have the same access to funds, because we're talking about education and the education of our kids. And that's what we're funding here. We've been talking about Article 16, Section 6. This is not a loan, it's not a credit, it's not a donation, which is what Article 16, Section 6 says. This is the Steamboat Legacy Scholarship account for students who would benefit from an alternate school of choice. So that right there answers our constitutional question. We are doing this for the scholarship, a scholarship for students for their elementary education, and now their preschool too. It was brought up the Hathaway Scholarship, and what about giving those monies to other institutions? And I think that that is a great thing. There's been discussions about that, and we need to look at that and have this across for both scholarship programs. I think the question on sports and extracurricular activities was answered. There can be an agreement between the school district and the student receiving these funds that they would then can use some of these funds to participate in extracurricular activities or other classes within the school district. We don't prescribe what that is. Currently in statute, it just says that students can, and that there's agreement with the school districts. That's not clearly spelled out any funding on those currently, so that might be something that we need to come back and look at in another year with these. But again, I just ask us to vote aye on this, because this is for the education of our next generation. And it's about all of our students having equitable access to the same scholarship and the same amount of money, so that they can all get educated in the environment that best suits them.
Thank you, Senator Brennan. We are voting on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 199. The ayes and noes have been called. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Second reading amendment number 2, House Bill 199, roll call. Anderson? No. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Crago? Aye. Crum? No. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? No. French? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. 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 Jones? No. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? No. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? No. Scott? Aye. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Garou, aye to no. Closing. Vote closed. On the amendment, 21 aye, 10 no.
Second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 199 has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to take a brief moment to clarify something from the Standing Committee amendment. So this is a while back. If you can bring your memory back to that discussion, there was a little bit of confusion when I was going through the amendment as to whether the bill would require students to take studies in the U.S. Constitution and the Wyoming Constitution, and that was on page 8. And I just wanted to clarify to the body that that page was not amended in the Standing Committee amendment, so it is in fact the case that participants in the ESA program must take a proficiency in the Wyoming Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. So I just wanted to clarify that for everyone, Mr. President.
Thank you. Who else wishes to speak on the bill? House Bill 199, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Bills on third reading. Madam Majority Floor Leader, do we have a no? Yeah, we do have a consent list.
Mr. President, I move the third reading consent list as follows.
House Bill 4, snowmobile registration and user fees. House Bill 14, solid waste municipal cease and transfer funding. House Bill 22, water and wastewater operator emergency response. House Bill 30, driver's licenses and IDs revisions. House Bill 41, environmental quality irrevocable letters of credit. House Bill 45, removing otters as protected animals. House Bill 61, state land lease preference amendments. House Bill 69, foreign adversary ownership of or control of business entities. House Bill 73, recreation, safety, rock climbing. House Bill 75, coal severance tax rate. House Bill 82, provider enrollment standards. And House Bill 92, Wyoming Livestock Board memorandums of understanding.
Thank you, Madam Floor Leader. Would anybody like to have any of these removed? Senator Case.
House Bill 75, coal severance tax rate, Mr. President.
House Bill 75 has been removed from the consent list. Any others? Seeing none? Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the Senate? House Bill 4, snowmobile registration and user fees. House Bill 14, solid waste municipal cease and transfer funding. House Bill 22, water and wastewater operator emergency response. House Bill 30, driver's licenses and IDs revisions. House Bill 41, environmental quality, irrevocable letters of credit. House Bill 45, removing otters as protected animals. House Bill 61, state land lease preference amendments. House Bill 69, foreign adversary ownership or control of business entities. House Bill 73, recreation safety, rock climbing. House Bill 82, provider enrollment standards, and House Bill 92, Wyoming Livestock Board memorandums of understanding. The chief clerk will call the roll.
On the consent list, Anderson. Aye. Barlow. Aye. Boner. Aye. Brennan. Aye. Case. Aye. Cooper. Aye. Craigo. Aye. Crum. Aye. Dockstetter. Aye. Driscoll. Aye. French. Aye. Guru. Aye. Hicks. Aye. Hutchings. Aye. Ide. Aye. Jones. Aye. Cole. Aye. Landon. Aye. Larson. Aye. McEwen. Aye. Nethercott. Olson. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Pearson. Aye. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar. Aye. Schuler. Aye. Scott. Aye. Smith. Aye. Steinmetz. Aye. President Beitman.
Aye.
On the consent list, 31 aye. House Bill 4, are there any changes? Aye. Aye to no. Hutchings. Aye to no. Salazar. Aye to no. Smith. Aye to no. McEwen.
Aye to no.
Aye to no. Larson. Aye to no. Pearson. Aye to no. Steinmetz. Aye to no. French. Aye to no.
Beitman, no.
Beitman, no. Nethercott, no. Cole? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 4, 19 aye, 12 no. House Bill 14, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 14, 31 aye. House Bill 22, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 2231I. House Bill 30, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 3031I. House Bill 41, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 4131I. House Bill 45, are there any changes? Scott? No. Hutchings? No. Larson? No. Salazar? No. No. Cooper? No. Case? No.
Biteman, no.
Beitman? No. McEwen? No. Rothfuss? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 45, 22 aye, 9 no. House Bill 61, are there any changes? Scott conflict. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 61, 30 aye, 1 conflict. House Bill 69, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 69, 31 aye. House Bill 73, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 73, 31 aye. House Bill 82, are there any changes? Aye? Aye to no? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 82, 30 aye, 1 no. And lastly, House Bill 92, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 92, 31 aye.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 4, snowmobile registration and user fees. House Bill 14, solid waste municipal cease and transfer funding. House Bill 22, water and wastewater operator emergency response. House Bill 30, driver's licenses and ID revisions. House Bill 41, environmental quality irrevocable letters of credit. House Bill 45, removing otters as protected animals. House Bill 61, state land lease preference amendments. House Bill 69, foreign adversary ownership or control of business entities. House Bill 73, recreation safety rock climbing. House Bill 82, Provider Enrollment Standards, and House Bill 92, Wyoming Livestock Board Memorandums of Understanding have passed the Senate. Bills on third reading and final passage. House Bill 11, third reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 11 engrossed manufacturing sales and use tax exemption amendments sponsored by the Minerals Committee, an act relating to taxation and revenue.
There is an amendment. Would the reading clerk please read in the amendment?
House Bill 11, third reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, page 1, line 1, delete.
Thank you. Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I'll move House Bill 11 to third reading, to the third reading, and ask for your favorable consideration. Could you please read the?
No, read, move third reading amendment number 1, please.
Oh, would you please read third, move, please, or would you please move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 11?
Okay. It's been read in, so go
And
ahead.
then to explain, this merely brings the bill back on its original form as it worked through the interim committee for a 10-year sunset. So what this is doing is putting a 10-year sunset on the sales tax.
Point of order, Senator Hicks?
I don't think anybody over here has that third reading amendment distributed on their table.
All right. Is that, you're missing one? Who else is missing one? We have about 3 or 4.
You have it?
Do you have access to the online version?
I'll go online, Mr. Chairman.
We can stand at ease for a couple minutes if you need to. Yeah, we'll stand at ease till the sound of the gavel. That way everybody's got the amendments. Senator Hicks, do you have your amendment? Are you good? Okay. All right, Senate will come back to order. We are on third reading amendment number 1, this House Bill 11. It has been moved. Everybody has their amendments. Senator Cole, back to you for explanation of your amendment. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no issue, Mr. President. Thank you. So this moves the sunset out to 2037. It gives the industry certainty with the future for investments, and it was considered, I believe, a compromise into what the bill started off as an interim topic, and it developed into the 10 years as a sunset date, and then it was removed through the process, and this merely just reinserts it. And I feel that it is supported by industry as a compromise, and I ask for your aye vote, and I'll stand for questions.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yep. Any discussion on the amendment? Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. On and against the amendment, I think one good reason is this would be the only exemption in the Department of Revenue on taxes that would have a sunset date. So I think we ought to keep them consistent. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Ide. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. Oh, Senator Case. Sorry, I didn't see you back there.
It's okay, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd ask us to support this exemption, and in a future time when we can have more reporting about the good that this exemption does, we should obtain that as well. Mr. President, we're going to have to get a better handle on this exemption because it's not what most people think. It's not just large factories or refineries or mining operations. It's all sorts of things that you wouldn't think should qualify for the exemption in the first place, including we had a bakery. And I'm sorry, I would like to amend this bill to add meat grinders to so that we can make sure that manufacturing hamburger would qualify. But I'm unable to do that at this last minute in the third reading. But I would hope you would support the sunset, and I'll work on that next year, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Case. Further discussion? Bill, does the sponsor wish to speak for a second time, or are you ready for the question? Senator Cole.
Mr. President, ready for the question.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of Senator Cole's motion to adopt third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 11, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. Amendment has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Discussion on the bill. Seeing none, the Chief Clerk, or House Bill 11 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass the Senate? The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, House Bill 11. Anderson? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Crago? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstader? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? No. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Case aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 11, 27 aye, 4 no.
House Bill 11, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 11 has passed the Senate. House Bill 28, third reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 28, Commercial Driver's Licenses Revision, sponsored by the Transportation Committee, an act relating to motor vehicles.
There is an amendment. Would the reading clerk please read in the amendment?
House Bill 28, third reading amendment number 1, page 3, line 18, delete.
Thank you, Randy. Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 28 and ask for your favorable consideration. I've been fighting for this bill, or for this amendment. On page 3, line 18, I would like to delete using and insert the in-hand use of on that section. So it's just to protect our CDL drivers that use their handheld devices, not in their hands necessarily, but for music, for maps, whatever, so that they are not somehow targeted using those handheld devices. And I feel like if they're not in their hand and distracting, or they are taking their hands off the wheel, that we need to protect our CDL drivers. Anyway, so that's the reason for this amendment, is just, I don't want to be targeted. Other CDL drivers don't want to be targeted because they have their handheld devices up where they can not only see the road, but figure out where they're going. Anyway, I would ask for your favorable consideration on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pearson. Discussion on the amendment. Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the amendment, if you look at section K, it's pretty well spelled out there that you can't use a wireless device to communicate, to write, to read, to text. And then on M, it's kind of vague. I think the good bringer of the amendment is correct. It just says you can't use it. And it's like, wow. So I think by putting this little, while holding the device and is perfect for this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hutchings. Discussion on the amendment. Want to take your second time? Are you ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Pearson's motion to adopt third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 28, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Third reading amendment number 2. Will the reading clerk please read in the amendment?
House Bill 28, third reading amendment number 2, page 3, line 19, after.
Back to you, Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move the committee of the whole, well, not move, I would like to withdraw the committee of the whole amendment number 2 to,
It's third reading.
third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 28.
Absent objection, third reading amendment number 2 has been withdrawn. Third reading amendment number 3, will the reading clerk please read it in?
House Bill 28, third reading amendment number 3, page 5, line 6, delete.
Over to you, Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. President, I move third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 28. Ask for your favorable consideration. Mr. President, this amendment expunges the expungement language on page 5. So it's new language that you'll see on page 5 added to the paragraph where the expunged records relating to the suspension of a driver's license of a minor may be considered for purposes of disqualification from driving a commercial motor vehicle under statute. If you read the rest of 31.7.120, the expungement is a very thoughtful and very serious bit of law. And if bottom of page 4, it gets to the point for any person whose records of a driver's license suspension were expunged under this subsection, the suspension under this subsection is deemed not to have occurred, and the person may reply accordingly upon any inquiry in the matter. And then 4 onto page 5, it shall not be made available for public inspection except for inspection by any law enforcement officer or agency. So, Mr. President, that's the existing language, and the expungement is exactly that. If you are eligible, if you're a minor, and you have your record expunged, the intent there is, all right, well, that is no longer a record, that you can answer, yes, I have not been convicted for it. And then for some reason, we're going back in, specifically for CDL driver look back, and de-expungifying, which is a word I just made up for you, de-expungifying the expunged record when legally, according to the prior sentence, they are allowed to say, no, I have never had a DUI. That's still in statute. No, I have never had a DUI. That would be the answer they would say. No, I have not been convicted of a DUI. I don't even know how they get to the point where they can de-expungify the record based on that answer and that scenario, but I don't know that it's in the public's interest, right? The purpose of these expungement statutes are to recognize that these minors made a bad decision and the record will be expunged, recognizing that it is not a pattern of their life, it is not part of their future, and we're basically not holding them accountable as young people for those actions that they're taking. That's the purpose of the expungement. I just do not see a compelling reason why we would, in this one case, for the look-back period for a CDL, require that we just abandon our own expungement statutes because the feds told us to, Mr. President. So I'm a little concerned that we're taking a step too far, and I'd ask the body to support the amendment.
Thank you. Discussion on the amendment. Discussion. Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe that I would support this amendment. And I thank the bringer of the amendment for looking into this for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Got some teamwork going on over there in that corner this morning. Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Against the expungement of the expungement. So the reason being is there's a loophole. And to be clear, it says they may consider. Not that they shall, it says they may consider. The issue is that they're not driving a motor scooter down the road. They're driving a large vehicle, and not to consider a prior DUI arrest, or conviction, I should say, would be inappropriate under some circumstances. This merely gives the agency the authority to consider. That's all it does. And I think that there's a reason for doing what they're asking for, and that is just to make reasonable decisions about past actions. And to say you get a do-over for having, could be multiple DUIs as a minor, or you shouldn't have been drinking at all, should be considered. It should be considered because it just shows a record of conduct. And I would think that they may consider it differently as years go by. And I think that is really merely what they're asking for. It's to get rid of a loophole that we currently have. On and against the amendment, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Cole. Senator Pappas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I guess you can vote your conscience on this. I vote it up or down based on what you think. I believe the reason why that we're asked to put it in here is for public safety. We're talking about having these big rigs driven by people who have shown that they've had some problems with substance abuse prior. I think it's rational to be able to look back in this one instance to see what their history was like, because they're asking not just for a driver's license, but a CDL. Something that I think we all know that we want all our CDL drivers and all our truckers on the roads to be a little more cautious and a little more safety oriented than most drivers. So anyhow, like I said, vote your conscience up or down. I think it's a safety issue that the department, and again, it may be able to look back. I think it's certainly a logical request. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Discussion on the amendment. Back to you, or Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know where we are on de-expunging at this point, but I guess my concern with the current language is, without the amendment, actually removing it, is it makes it double discretionary, meaning they can look at it or they may not. This is for disqualification. So my question for the proponents of the bill, which I'm going to support the bill in the end, is what right of appeal does someone who would be subject to a disqualification under this current expungement language, what right of appeal do they have to say, no, I get a do-over, I get a second chance? So it's discretionary, i.e. may, and then what right of appeal would they have afterwards if it were actually instituted, if they were disqualified? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. Further discussion. Senator Pearson for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm talking a lot today. What you have to understand is that minors make mistakes, right? They learn from their mistakes. And if their record's been expunged, they deserve that second chance to possibly do something that could improve their livelihood. So I realize that it says may, but just understand that kids make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all learn from them. And so please vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I would agree with the bringer and the last speaker. I mean, what's the point of an expungement if you can still turn that stone over and use it against somebody? So I'm honored for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else? Back to the bringer for the second. You're good? All right, we will expunge debate. We are on third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 28. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Chair's in doubt. Sorry. All those in favor, please stand. Ears get rusty on a 3-day weekend. 19 aye, all those opposed, less than 19. $12. Close, Senator Anderson, close. All right, third reading amendment number 3 has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Discussion on the bill. House Bill 28, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? The chief clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, House Bill 28, Anderson? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Crago? No. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? No. French? No. Guru? Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Cole? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? No. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Close. Hicks, no to aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 28, 25 aye, 6 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 28 has passed the Senate. House Bill 75, third reading of the House bill.
House Bill 75, coal severance tax rate, sponsored by Representative Clausen, an act related to severance tax.
Thank you, Randy. Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would rise to speak against House Bill 75. Mr. President, I don't think we're doing anything for anybody with this bill And we're only hurting our general fund, our budget reserve account, and the school foundation account, this bill. I did some research into what's happened the last time we lowered the rate by 0.5%, and that went into effect on the 1st of July, 2022. Looks to me like it didn't affect production whatsoever. But what it did do, Mr. President, was to provide that in the years and quarters following the tax break, both of our coal companies that exist in Wyoming did provide a dividend to their shareholders. In most of the quarters beforehand, they did not. Coal production was really, you know, it's kind of hard to do all the trends, but it doesn't look to me like it was very much affected. The amount of money was between 8 and 9 cents. Or I'm sorry, it was 6 cents on, the two coal companies sell their coal for different prices. The average price of one of them is higher than the other. For one, it was about, the lower one was about 6 cents, the difference it made in delivered price of coal. The other one was a little higher than that, probably closer to 7 point something. Under this proposal, given the prices for the latest quarter I have, which was the third quarter 24, don't have it for fourth quarter 24, should be able to get that. But for one coal company, it would have been 8.4 cents a ton. 8.4 cents a ton on coal that's delivered for $16.86 a ton in the third quarter of 24. The other coal company, their coal's a little cheaper, $13.84. On that, it would amount to $6.9 cents for that entire ton. Mr. President, that's not changing anybody's mind as to whether they buy a ton of coal or not in Wyoming. The biggest thing that drives the factors in this industry are the fact that fossil fuel plants run when there's not renewables available on the market. Some years have more renewable, some less. But when fossil fuel plants run, there's a competition between coal and gas. And the gas plants are a little bit more efficient per BTU. So you can stand a little bit, if you're comparing BTU prices versus coal versus gas, gas can be a little bit more expensive than coal on a BTU basis and still get the electricity generation market. So right now, you know, gas is pretty competitive. These are long-term decisions about coal plants, their future. They're in all these integrated resource plans across the country. This tax break is not changing any of the plans for any coal plant whatsoever. And all we would be doing by passing this is to transfer money from the people of Wyoming to coal companies. Sometimes coal companies use that money to pay dividends, and you need to do that, Mr. President. You can't not pay a dividend forever. But sometimes they use it to make investments. Sometimes those investments are overseas, in places like Australia, to develop coal for the Asian markets. Vote no on this bill, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Case. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I agree with almost all the previous analysis, Mr. President, with one difference. I suspect the beneficiary of this bill, if it passes, will not be the coal companies. I suspect they'll be the railroads. That I think the way the transportation works in this particular field, the railroads manage to capture most of the difference between the what's charged and any savings in what the coal prices is and what the customer gets paid. So I think the only people that are really going to get helped here are the railroads. It won't be, Mr. President, the people of Wyoming.
Okay. Anybody else? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's on and for the bill, and I certainly appreciate the discussion and those senior colleagues who have a depth of knowledge and a time of service that reflects on different times. Senate District 23 is just about 80% of the coal being mined in the state of Wyoming right now. That's the district I represent. So it's pretty easy for me to stand up here and say what I can do to take care of those companies and the folks that work in those companies. There's no question what that is in my mind. And as far as the transfer of wealth, it was their money to begin with. We're taking it. Now we're just letting them keep that 0.5% themselves. So on and for the bill, I appreciate the fiscal concerns going back to the actual fiscal note. It's $9 million. Infusing $9 million, whether it's to a viable company or whether it's to another year's worth of production, or maybe it's a few more tons. I think those are all positive things, i.e., again, it's their money. We're letting keep a little bigger piece of that pie. Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the bill.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the bill as well. That said, it's our coal, and it's the people's coal, and it's the children's coal, and they're severing it permanently from the land. And so it's very important that we recognize that asset as being finite and something that needs to last for generations, the revenue earned from the allowance of them severing that asset from the land forever. So on and for the bill, I've always been on and for the bill. But remember, it's for generations to come. And so prudent fiscal policy associated with this requires increases and decreases, recognizing that long-term position of trust we find ourselves in, understanding our natural resources and how they operate in our state.
Thank you. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just to take off a little bit about, so let's talk about what severance taxes are and where they go. And it does dovetail in with what the majority floor leader was talking about. We do severance taxes for a number of reasons, but the first 1.5% of all severance taxes goes into the Mineral Permanent Trust Fund. And the reason that we do that is because this is a finite, one-time resource. And so future generations have we have an obligation to future generations that they should derive some of the benefits of the wealth that we're accumulating now. So the first 1.5% of those severance taxes goes into the corpus of the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. The next 1% was what we call the optional 1% severance tax. That's a statutory component. That currently 50% goes into the corpus of the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, 50% into the corpus of the Common School Permanent Land Fund. The next $155 million of severance taxes that come into the state, 62% goes to the general fund. But it also goes to the water development accounts that each one of your cities and towns utilizes in your irrigation districts, 15%. Cities and towns get about 9% of those severance taxes. This is what we call that first $155 million. Once you segregate out the 1.5% constitutional, the 1%, then we get into, and this money is distributed to the general fund, the water account, cities, towns, the highway fund that funds your highway maintenance, your counties, county roads, cities, towns, and counties. And then when we get over the $155 million, that money then runs back into, part of it goes into right now to the school foundation reserve account, part of it goes to the general fund. But keep in mind, this money is going to future generations through those constitutional diversions. Part of that, first 1.5% is going into the corpus. And so it's important that we know when we do these severance taxes, where that money goes and what the ramifications of them are. And so neither speaking on and for the bill, but I think informed decisions are the best decisions. You need to decide whether this little piece of this is important for the state of Wyoming and future generations and for your counties, cities, and towns, water development. That's where some of the severance tax, you're taking money away from those other activities that we have that are a fundamental purpose of government. So just information for the body, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Discussion on the bill. Senator Ralphus.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm against the bill. I think it's important to realize this is effectively a $9 million a year appropriation in perpetuity. And to think about it that way. This is taking a substantial amount of the revenue that we generate on an ongoing basis and eliminating that, which is equivalent to a $9 million appropriation that doesn't end up yielding anything. And it should be taken very seriously from that standpoint. Now, Mr. President, I am sympathetic to the idea that we overtax coal, we overtax oil, we overtax gas. Our mineral extractive industry has paid the bills for many years, continues to pay the bills, and we rely almost entirely on them for that. But, Mr. President, regrettably, we have been unwilling to diversify our tax structure in a way that would allow us to alleviate the taxes that currently exist. If there were a $9 million alternative, for example, taxing chemical engineers on the work we do, that would be great, although perhaps not all 9 million. I don't think there are enough of us, and I don't know how I would afford that. But the reality is, we can't keep cutting and cutting and cutting and continue to provide the services. And when we contemplate the amount that we're looking at for property tax reform and for other tax reform during this session, this is a meaningful $9 million. Mr. President, it seems that if we are going to go down this path of trying to diminish severance tax on our minerals, we need to find alternative industries that would be willing to step up and pay taxes. And it's true that the burden is disproportionate on the mineral extractive industry. They pay 30% gross or more of revenue towards taxes, where other industries, financial technology, for example, financial sector pays less than 1% of gross. So there's a lot of room to improve. But without having any type of diversification, continuing to cut revenue in a session where we're focused on cutting large amounts of revenue is just not going to allow us to operate the government in the way that the people needs and pay for the programs the good senator from Carbon County was mentioning. On and against.
Thank you, Senator. Over to you, Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. I wish I knew that this would do some good in our service industries, many of which are in my community. Wish I knew if it would help us keep a job or two up in Campbell County, where I want to try to support my senator friends who represent that part of the world. But you know, the tenor of this session has become, what more can we do for those of us in this room? Every now and then I try to step back, Mr. President, and think about those pictures that I have on my desk, which represent the next 2 generations. And quite frankly, it just feels like to me, folks, we've kind of been in it for ourselves. We want all our property tax back. We want to take a few more exemptions off the books. We want to cut taxes on meat grinders, and you know, now we're wanting to cut some taxes up in the coal mines. And I'm usually for that. I'm a pretty fiscally conservative guy. But that fiscal mind of mine is going, well, what about these next 2 generations? We've always fought very, very hard to make sure that we're leaving something for them. 9 million? Well, I don't know. 9 million here, 9 million there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money that we're taking off the table. And rest assured, Mr. President, as soon as we take this tax off, it isn't going back on there. This is a tough vote. And I'm thinking about those next 2 generations. Once that's severed and once it's gone, they don't have it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Landon. Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none? All right, House Bill 75, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? The chief clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, House Bill 75. Anderson? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Crago? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? No. Hutchings? No. Ide? Aye. Jones? No. Cole? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? No. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman? Aye. Closing vote? Closing vote. Hutchings, no to aye. Closing vote closed. House Bill 75, 23 aye, 8 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority members elected to the Senate, House Bill 75 is passed the Senate. All right. Madam Majority Floor Leader, that clears the desk.
Mr. President, I move that we stand recessed until 2 p.m.
Recessed till 2 p.m. Any announcements? Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Your Corporations Committee sloughed off all weekend, so we're going to work them hard tomorrow. And so we're going to start at 7 a.m., note the time. We'll take up House Bill 131 engrossed, ballot drop boxes prohibition. We've completed almost all the public testimony on that. That ought to go pretty fast. House Bill 154, false voting amendments. House Bill 156, proof of voter residency registration qualifications. House Bill 173, engrossed, independent candidate requirements. House Bill 238, engrossed, ballot harvesting prohibition. We'll continue our work upon tomorrow, final adjournment for the bills we don't get done in the morning. But once we're done, we're done.
Thank you.
Buy a round. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks for your hard work. Senator Olson.
Mr. President, Committee Number 1, Judiciary, will meet upon this noon recess at 12:15 in room W006 to continue its consideration of House Bill 172, repeal gun-free zone and preemption amendments.
Thank you. Senator Schuler, what's happening with your Education Committee?
Thank you, Mr. President. House Education, excuse me, not House Education, let's go Senate Education. Committee will meet tomorrow morning, Friday, at the usual spot, W110, and online to hear, first of all, House Bill 235, Career Tech Ed, Educational Equipment and Supplies, and House Bill 46, Homeschool Freedom Act.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Appropriations will meet at 12:30 in room 113. We'll be dealing with House Bill 316, School Finance Model Recalibration, House Bill 33, Vehicle Sales and Use Tax Distribution Highway Fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further announcements? All right, you all heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. The Senate will stand recessed till 2 p.m.